Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much for joining me today. My name is Richard from the Seneca team, and today we're going to look at how Seneca can be used to support your remote working and remote learning effort that is going on at the moment with schools being closed. Now, I know obviously this is a really difficult time for teachers and for students and schools as well. I hope to be able to unpick some of the things that we at Seneca are able to do to support. But also look at some other apps and some other things that you can use as well. And the way we're going to frame this session is it's going to be linked around a literature review from the EEF to basically look at what best practice is from the research in terms of understanding what works in remote learning, thinking about students. And there are some reassuring things in there, which we will cover during the session. First thing to say, though, is if you have any questions on anything I talk about, or you want to ask questions about Seneca more generally, please do use the chat feature to ask any questions, and I'll be happy to answer those. Now, as I mentioned, we're going to look at this literature review as a way, as a sort of starting point and a way to structure this session. And just to give a bit of background on this literature review, it was commissioned by the DfE back in April when the first lockdown happened. And it looked at examining different pieces of existing research, which included 60 different systematic reviews and meta-analyses. And it looked for approaches that schools could be using to deliver on online curriculum, which at that point was obviously very new to us all during that month, those first months. So yeah, we're looking around for different suggestions, and this was sort of one of the things the government did to support. And what this review concludes is that there are 5 key things that you should be considering as a school, but also as a teacher, to implement strategies to support students' learning during remote learning. But it also looks at supporting parents as well. Now, the first of those recommendations made in the review is actually, I think, quite a reassuring one. This is one of the sort of really reassuring things about this this review. And what it says is that teaching quality is more important than how a lesson is delivered when you're delivering remotely. Now, this is reassuring in my eyes because obviously we all want to be within the 4 walls of a classroom, delivering content in the way we normally did, and no doubt that is better for pupils. But pupils can still learn through remote teaching, and there is evidence to show that as part of this review. But what the review talks about is that high quality teaching is still high quality teaching, and no matter how you're delivering it, whether in person or doing it remotely. So it suggests that you should be reviewing your practice to make sure that you are using the elements that you would use in a classroom to deliver an effective lesson. So are your explanations clear? Are you scaffolding for your pupils? Are you providing timely feedback? All these things that you would know to do in a classroom setting are still really important now that you are doing remote learning rather than in person in classroom learning. Now, it also talks about how it's more important to think about these strategies compared to thinking about how or when you deliver the content. So if you're looking at delivering a content in a live lesson or a pre-recorded lesson, what the evidence actually shows that that's not the important part of the delivery. What's important is that you are using clear research influenced strategies in your teaching to make sure that you are delivering a good quality piece of content for your students to understand. So this might be, for example, a way it talks about in the review is how to structure a lesson is it might be that you introduce something with a live lesson or in a pre-recorded video. But during that lesson it's really important that you're delivering the explanation that builds on prior knowledge, that builds pupils' understanding, and also that you're subsequently assessing these pupils as well. So there's a few different things that you can do, and we can support you with at Seneca thinking about this specifically. And the first being the way that we create our content on Seneca. So I should mention that Seneca, if you're not familiar, is a free platform that students, teachers, parents can sign up to and get the delivery of content, but also the assessment and the assignment setting that teachers would need as well. And you can see all the data as a teacher as well. Now, when we're thinking about delivery of content on Seneca, we're very particular in how we write in our writing style for the courses we have. So what you'll notice about this example from a geography course is that the way we write our content is really specific to make sure we reduce cognitive load. And we do a few different ways we do that is make sure that each sentence stands alone. You don't have to refer to the previous sentence to understand the new sentence. We also keep our sentences very short and avoid ambiguity in sentences. Now, all these things reduce cognitive load and improve the chances of students learning and retaining this information. Another really important piece of everyone's practice is differentiating work for your students, or differentiating support for your students potentially. We have a number of different ways we do this on Seneca. So firstly, at the most basic level, we focus on different question content that is delivered to different students depending on how they answer the questions. So the system will fully adapt to the individual, and it will learn what the student does and doesn't know. So no two Seneca sessions are the same. It's the sort of takeaway. And if you stood behind two students, you'd see very different sessions depending on how they answered. Now, a second way we can differentiate, other than just here are different questions that are tailored to you, what you need to know, is also thinking about the difficulty of questions. So here we have 2 blanks and 1 filled in. We could leave all 3 of those blank. We could only leave 1 blank. And that obviously affects the difficulty of the question that's being asked. So each of these different ways we can differentiate work for students, and that all happens automatically depending on how well students are doing. The review also talks about feedback and how important timely feedback is as part of a good practice. And again, with Seneca, students get instant feedback on their answers, so they're learning straight away whether they do or don't understand different concepts. You can see here I've got a question right followed by a question wrong, so I can really see that immediately. I get corrected when I make a mistake, which allows me to then progress faster. And then you can obviously see all the data and track this for your students to understand what it is that they are doing, how well they're doing it, but also so you can put in place some support. Now, it also talks about the importance during this sort of idea of high quality teaching is the most important thing, making sure that you're assessing your pupils still, even though we're in a remote learning session. Now, this sort of low stakes quizzing, retrieval practice data that you can see on screen here is obviously really valuable for understanding what your students do and don't know. But we want to sort of take this to the next level in terms of the follow-up of work as well. So what we see here is what we call smart reassign. So we basically allow pupils to have work automatically set for them based on the criteria you as a teacher set. So you could use the assignment data from an assignment you set to basically reset the work for anyone who doesn't complete it, anyone who gets less than 50%, or anyone who gets less than 80%, or whatever it is you want to select. You can then select a really tailored follow-up task for your students. And then when it comes to sort of more rigorous, sort of more summative assessment, we have what we call these standardized assessment courses, which we offer for free. These are available as sort of end of topic tests, if you like, and students can use these with, or you can set these for students and to understand what they do and don't know. The second suggestion made in the EEF review looks at the access to technology and how important that is. Now, what it stresses is, this is probably not a surprise to anyone on the call, is that this is particularly important for disadvantaged pupils because almost all remote learning uses digital technology and requires access to both computers or some sort of smartphone, tablet, something like that, and the internet as well. And a lack of access to these is likely to be particularly, it's more likely to be felt by disadvantaged pupils. So the lack of access to these technologies is a significant barrier, and that's highlighted in the review. But on the sort of flip side of the most basic level of access to technology, the other side of this is accessing technology. So being able to use the technology that you have access to effectively. And it also talks about making sure that teachers and students are fully trained on how to use different platforms, especially when lots are being used at the moment. And again, we try and keep this simple by providing all subjects on Seneca, so you can use us for everything rather than students having to learn lots of different platforms. Now, it also talks about training and making sure, as I say, teachers know how that works, but this doesn't need to be in-person training or a webinar like this or anything like that. It can be self-directed, it could be informal training, it could just be training by you going ahead and practicing how to do it, and learning how these things work. Now, again, a few ways that we support with that at Seneca is, first of all, Seneca is available on any device. So we try and make sure that the chances are, if you have a smartphone, a tablet or a computer, you'll be able to access Seneca, and we hope that that covers the majority of your pupils. And I appreciate there's other sort of government level things going on that are trying to get access to computer who don't have access to these things. But then also thinking about training and support we provide. This is just a screenshot from the teacher platform that we have. When you're first setting up Seneca, we talk you through the process very gently. We have these 5 steps to get started by setting up a class. There's an option to get help there, you can see. So we really try and support and sort of talk you through the process of setting up your account to make sure you're getting the fullest use out of Seneca. We also have, if that isn't helping, we have help pages with all the different videos and things that show you how to do different things. And if you're still struggling, you can always get in contact with our customer support team. My colleague Olivia mans that, and she'll be able to support with helping you with any questions that you have. Now, the first suggestion made in this review, or the first sort of acknowledgement really, is that peer interactions are a really, really important part of learning, because they provide motivation for pupils, and also they are proven to improve learning outcomes. And this was highlighted in multiple reviews as something that's really important to make sure you're maintaining within remote learning, even though it can be difficult sometimes. Now, the reviews say it's important, as I say, for motivation and also improving outcomes. And some of the things that they looked at in this review were peer marking. Also, they looked at peer feedback for different pieces of work. Also, modeling or sharing models of good work with your pupils. And also the opportunities for live discussion of content. Now, what it does acknowledge is that not all of these will be suitable for all pupils, and that there are different approaches to peer interaction that are likely to be better suited to different age groups, different groups of students. So just bear that in mind. Don't feel like you have to start using live discussions in your lesson. If it's not appropriate for your students, that's fine. But there are lots of schools that I've worked with over the last 6 months that have really been trying to focus on how to bring this element of the normal curriculum into their remote learning. And I've seen lots of schools doing some really great things around trying to make sure we're not just unmuting a whole class on Zoom and it's causing chaos, but more providing different ways to have live discussion and peer interaction using different platforms. So you could look at something like shared message boards on Google Classroom, Microsoft Teams, but you could also look at some like mind mapping tools. So we have an example here, something I'd really recommend is Miro. We use it here at Seneca. And you could use it with your students as well. It's basic collaborative mind mapping. You can see who's adding what, everyone's collaborating together. So check that out if you want to have a look. But then also from Seneca's perspective, we also provide the opportunity for you to have sort of peer competition, if you like, through the data we provide. Something a lot of teachers at the moment using this data to sort of create leaderboards and provide data for students. And you can either do this on sort of a topic level, like you can see on screen now, or you can do it on sort of an overview level. So this looks at this screen's in the students tab on Seneca. You can see sort of overview of amount of time spent, the average scores, things like that. So you can again use these to motivate your pupils. We've also got leaderboards that we can provide for pupils. These are available to all pupils. And again, this is something that happens automatically within the app that you won't necessarily know about as a teacher, because we only have it on the teacher platform, on the student platform. But what it is that we have what we call a global leaderboard. So it basically compares the person's account it was. So in this case, me, I'm Strong Carbon, that's my pseudonym on Seneca. It compares me to everyone else studying that course on Seneca. And you can see I'm not doing very well, 190,000 or something. But you can see how I compare. And as I answer more questions, I can see my ranking improve. And as I don't learn, I can see my ranking fall. So again, a really good way to motivate students is using these leaderboards. Now, the fourth way the review talks about supporting students is through remote learning, is that it's kind of an opportunity really that we have, that actually students are having to be so independent at the moment because they're away from the classroom, they're away from the teacher's support, that actually supporting students to with the tools to become better independent learners is a real opportunity to grab hold of in this situation. And there's lots of reviews that were looked at as part of the research, which highlighted the value of developing these independent learning strategies with pupils. Some of the examples that were looked at were even things, things you'd do probably in class anyway, but making sure they're still part of your practice now. Things like getting students to reflect on their work or to consider the strategies they'll use if they get stuck, and making sure that they understand how to get support they need. It's really, really important that you sort of provide that support for pupils. But there's also a lot of wider evidence suggesting that this sort of metacognition and self-regulation that you can teach students and you can give them the tools to have is particularly beneficial for disadvantaged pupils. And they're the ones who are most likely to benefit from this support. And these could even be things as simple as providing checklists of things to tick off in a day or in a lesson of activities that students should be completing. So again, a few different ways that we can provide support with this is firstly with our accounts. So thinking about independent learning and getting students to really drive their own learning at the moment you could look at using what we have here, the different topics you can see down the sort of left-hand side. And then down the right-hand side, we've got these circles. And what these circles represent is basically how well your students have done when they've studied these tasks previously. So one way they could learn more independently is they can use these to basically deliver or think about what they should be revisiting based on their previous scores. So they can look at how well they've done, they can revisit information based on those previous scores. Now, everything I've talked about previously has been available with our free accounts, but if you do work in a premium school, there are a couple of other options as well. So firstly, there is what we call wrong answer mode. Now, this is an independent learning tool that will help pull together all of students' wrong answers into one place and help them really focus on the areas that they have struggled with most. So again, they can just work through these. You can see at this example, it just pulls up basically all of the wrong answers I've ever got. And I can work through these and sort of really focus in on those. And then the other premium learning tool that we use to develop independence is called Smart Learning Mode. And again, if you're in a premium school, I'd really recommend you're using this a lot at the moment. The way Smart Learning Mode works is it basically uses all of the data we have on a student to curate the experience for them. So it looks at supporting students to develop to sort of focus in on the areas that they haven't visited in a while, that they haven't done very well in the past. It uses all this data mixed in with forgetting curves to basically get students to revisit information at just the right time for their learning. But if you're not in premium school, don't worry about those. But if you are, you can sort of make use of those. Now, the fifth and final suggestions made as part of this review is that there are different approaches to remote learning and they suit different types of content and different pupils as well. And there's such a wide variety of remote learning tools and different ways you can deliver remote learning. And each of them have different strengths and weaknesses. So, for you to recognize that and evaluate that is really important. Now, the review says that you as teachers should be supported to consider the different approaches that you could take and think about how the delivery or method delivery best suits the pupils that you're working with and also the content you're looking to deliver. So that, again, so that's a really important part of it. So one example they give is that games are a really good way of developing vocab learning in MFL, but there's less evidence around games in other subjects. So just bear that in mind. It's just one example of many different examples around the research of different forms of delivery. Now, there's also, it also talks about in the review that the technology is there and really good at supporting retrieval practice and self-quizzing. And that's been proven to be really effective in helping students to develop their ideas and knowledge. but it shouldn't be a replacement for other forms of assessment. So again, thinking about how Seneca can support with this, firstly, think about retrieval practice. You know, the review talks about how important that is in developing ideas and knowledge. And when a student studies on Seneca, about 80% of what they see is retrieval practice, so questions for them to answer, and the other 20% is content. So we're using the effective learning strategies suggested in the by the EEF review, and these are, you know, heavily backed by research. But then there's also a really wide variety of different types of courses we offer for free as well. So again, linking back to what we were talking about earlier, but it mentions it again here, is that retrieval practice is not a replacement for other forms of assessment. So again, we provide you with the the standardized assessment courses that you can see here, to use them as they're kind of like end-of-topic tests. Basically, you can use them to assess your pupils' understanding. Now that's, as I say, available free. And again, if you are in a premium school, there are also, there is also a greater range of different courses you can access as well. So check those out if you're interested. Everything from like the exam style questions that you could start setting for your pupils from predicted papers, the different courses looking at different grade boundaries, like the premium knowledge courses and the 4 to 5 boosters. All these different variety of content. Again, we really recommend you using a variety of content for students as part of the suite that you're offering them to support their learning. Now, the final thing I wanted to mention was the parent platform. Now, parents are obviously much more heavily involved in your students' education at the moment. So we want to make sure that you know about our parent platform, and if you want to use it, you can. It's a free platform. Parents just can sign up with their own email addresses. They just connect to their students automatically. And what they can then see is data on what their child's been up to. They can see learning time, average scores, sessions completed, number of correct answers. So they can get a bit of an understanding of how their child's learning is going, and they can then support them in them more effectively. And this is something that, again, you can use as a school if you wish. And it's something that we provide basically support for you if you want to use it to share with your student, to share with the parents of your students. So if you want to use any of these different resources that we have available, like the SMS template or the email templates that we have, can be also used as letter templates. We've also got these printable cards that you can print off and hand to students, hand to pupils and to parents if you want so, or explainer videos. So these are all available for you, and I'll pop them in the chat now. So if you want to grab hold of them, you can do so just by clicking on the links I've just posted in the chat. But otherwise, you can just make sure that your parents, the parents of your students, know that this is an option for them, if you wish. So that's basically all I wanted to talk about in today's session. If you have any questions and haven't had a chance to write them in the chat yet, please do start to write them out. But otherwise, I'll start to sort of wind down. So thank you very much for joining. I hope you found it useful. I appreciate it's a really tough time to be a teacher. Some of you will probably be parents as well. And it's also really tough for your students. So I really acknowledge that it's a really difficult situation we all find ourselves in, and I hope some of the things I've talked about in this session that we offer at Seneca can support you with that. But if you've got any questions, like I mentioned earlier, the best thing to do is get in contact, or first of all look at our help pages, get in contact with our customer support team, and they'll be able to support you with whatever help you need. But thanks for joining, and I hope you have a good rest. And thanks very much.